They say the worst kind of betrayal isn't the one you see coming. It's the one that waits until you're at your weakest. For me, it happened while I was lying in a hospital bed, fighting for my life. When I finally came home, it wasn't home anymore. Someone else was living in it. And the man who promised to protect me had sold it behind my back. Hello. My name is Emma. I'm 42 years old, and this is the story of how my husband, the man I trusted most, sold our house while I was in the hospital. I'll tell you about Daniel, my husband of 18 years. My sister Sophie, who became my lifeline when everything fell apart. And the strangers who answered my door the day my world collapsed. Before all this happened, my life was simple, peaceful even. I taught English at a local community school and spent my evenings cooking dinner, listening to old jazz records, and waiting for Daniel to come home. He was a property agent, confident, talkative, the kind of man who could charm anyone. When we met, I thought he was everything I'd ever wanted. Stability, laughter, and dreams big enough for both of us. Our home, that little cream-colored house on Hawthorne Street, was our pride. It wasn't fancy, but every corner held a memory. The kitchen where I burned my first pie, the porch where we spent summer nights drinking lemonade, the bedroom window that caught the sunrise just right. But over the years, Daniel changed. Subtly at first. He started coming home late, his phone glued to his hand. When I'd ask, he'd say, "Work's crazy these days, Em. You know how it is." I did know, or I thought I did. Then one morning I collapsed. The doctors said it was severe pneumonia. I spent 6 long weeks in the hospital. Tubes, medicine, and silence. Daniel visited every day in the beginning, smiling, reassuring me that everything was fine. But as the days turned into weeks, his visits grew shorter, then fewer. When I was finally discharged, I called him. No answer. I assumed he was busy getting the house ready. I even smiled thinking he'd surprise me, maybe clean the kitchen, maybe hang new curtains. But when the taxi stopped at our old driveway, I saw a new car parked outside. New curtains. A woman's voice inside. And when the door opened, it wasn't Daniel who stood there. It was a young mother, holding a baby, looking confused. "Can I help you?" she asked. I tried to smile, even as my heart pounded. I live here." She frowned gently. "Oh, I'm sorry. We bought this place 3 weeks ago, from a man named Daniel." For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. I just stood there, gripping the gate like it could hold me up. My home, the place I'd dreamed, cooked, loved, and lived, was gone. That night, I stayed at Sophie's place. My sister didn't ask many questions. She just made me tea, held my hand, and said quietly, "We'll find out what he did." The next morning she did. Daniel had sold our house for cash. Every penny had gone straight into his personal account. And 2 days later, he disappeared. At first, I wanted to believe there was an explanation, maybe a mistake, maybe something temporary. But as the days passed, and his phone stayed disconnected, I realized the truth. The man I thought I knew had been planning this for months. He waited until I was too weak to fight back. The morning after I found out, I woke up at my sister Sophie's house to the smell of fresh coffee. For a few seconds, I almost forgot where I was, until I saw the packed hospital bag on the floor beside me. That's when the memory hit again. The strangers in my home, the baby's cry, the woman's pitying look. Sophie walked in holding 2 mugs. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. I shook my head. How could I? She sat beside me, sliding a piece of paper across the table. Mark pulled this from the property records. There it was in black and white. Seller, Daniel Miller. Buyer, the Lewis family. The sale had gone through 3 weeks ago. The funds were transferred directly into an account under Daniel's name. He didn't even hesitate. Sophie said, voice tight. Signed it, collected the money, and vanished. I stared at that paper for a long time. It didn't feel real. I kept thinking, maybe it's a misunderstanding. Maybe Daniel's coming back. Maybe he'll explain everything. But as each minute passed, hope turned to anger. That night, I sat alone in the guest room and opened the old laptop I'd brought from the hospital. It was one of the few things still mine. I logged into our joint email, only to find the password changed. Then our shared bank account empty. Every dollar is gone. That's when I realized this wasn't a sudden mistake. It was a plan. A carefully crafted betrayal. Sophie didn't waste time. The next morning, she called her friend Clara, a lawyer who handled property disputes. Clara listened quietly as I told her everything. The illness, the hospital, the sale. When I finished, she exhaled sharply. Emma, this is financial abuse, and it's a crime. Especially since the house was joint property. Her tone was calm but firm. We can fight this. But first, we need to find him. Find him. Those words echoed in my mind. Where was Daniel? His phone was off. His office had no idea where he went. Even his co-workers seemed shocked. One of them said he'd resigned suddenly, saying he was moving overseas for a new start. Overseas. That word burned through my chest. Later that week, I drove to his mother's house, a small place 2 hours outside the city. Margaret had always been kind to me, though distant. When she opened the door, her face went pale. Emma, she whispered. Oh dear. I wasn't expecting you. Her eyes darted around nervously, like she was hiding something. Do you know where Daniel is? I asked quietly. She hesitated, then sighed. He came here 2 weeks ago, packed a few things, said he was going away for business. Did he say where? No. But he left this. She handed me an envelope, my name scrawled across it in his handwriting. Inside was a single letter. Emma, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. You've always had a good heart, but I can't live like this anymore, trapped, suffocating. The house was my decision. It was mine to sell. I deserve a chance to start over. Don't look for me. Daniel. I stared at the letter until my hands trembled. Trapped. Suffocating? After everything I gave him, the years, the trust, the loyalty, that's what I was to him. I wanted to scream, to tear the letter apart. But instead, I folded it neatly back into the envelope. When I turned to leave, Margaret grabbed my arm. Emma, he's not well. He's been chasing something. Money, deals, I don't know what. He's been desperate. Desperate. Yes. For greed. For freedom. For something I never understood. That night, I sat in Sophie's kitchen with the letter on the table between us. He didn't just sell the house, I said. He erased me. Like I never existed. Sophie's voice was steady. Then we're going to make sure he remembers. We decided to file a legal claim first thing the next morning. But before that, I wanted to see something for myself. The next day, I went back to our old house. It looked different in the daylight, cleaner, brighter. The new family was outside, tending to the garden. I stood at the gate, watching quietly until the woman, the same one from before, noticed me. Hey, she said gently, walking over. I wasn't sure you'd come back. I smiled faintly. I just wanted to see it one last time. She hesitated, then said, I'm sorry about what happened. That man, Daniel, he seemed so normal. He said his wife had passed away years ago. My heart dropped. He had told them I was dead. I thanked her, but I barely remember walking back to the car. Every step felt heavier than the last. Dead. That's how he saw me. That's how he wanted the world to see me. Gone, forgotten, erased. But he was wrong. I wasn't gone. And I was done being the quiet. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of calm. The kind that comes not from peace, but from clarity. I knew what I had to do. Find out everything Daniel had done. Every lie, every transaction, every secret he'd buried behind my back. Sophie drove me to Clara's law office that morning. It was on the third floor of an old brick building downtown. The smell of coffee and fresh paper filled the air as we stepped inside. Clara greeted us with a professional smile, but her eyes were kind. "Emma, I've reviewed the documents. It's worse than we thought," she said quietly, spreading a few files across her desk. My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" She pointed to the papers. "He didn't just sell the house. He also liquidated your joint savings, transferred everything into offshore accounts. And according to these transactions, he's been planning this for months." I stared at the statements. Line after line of withdrawals, hotel stays, and wire transfers I didn't recognize. How could he have done this without me knowing? I whispered. Clara adjusted her glasses. "He used your illness as cover. Every transaction happened while you were hospitalized. The sale paperwork even includes a forged medical release form, pretending you gave consent." My hands trembled. "He forged my signature?" Clara nodded. "Yes. It's a fraud, Emma. But it's also personal. Deeply personal." I sat there in silence, the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. The man I'd once trusted with everything, my home, my heart, my future, had used my weakest moment to destroy me. Later that night, Sophie and I went through an old box of documents I had left at her house years ago. I found the folder where we kept old bills, joint property records, and letters. Inside I noticed something strange, a second set of house papers. My name was missing from one of them. "Sophie," I said, voice shaking. "He must have redrafted the deed before selling it. Look, this one's dated 2 months before I got sick." Sophie frowned. "So he planned it even before you went to the hospital?" "Yes," I whispered. "He was waiting for his chance." I leaned back, my chest heavy with disbelief. How long had he looked at me, smiling, pretending, while plotting to erase me from my own life? A week passed. We filed a case against him, and Clara began tracing his bank activity. But then came the call I'd been waiting for, and dreading. It was from an unknown number. I answered. "Emma." The voice was deep, familiar. My breath caught in my throat. "Daniel." He hesitated before speaking. I didn't want it to end like this. My hand tightened around the phone. "Then why did you do it?" "I had no choice," he said, his tone oddly calm. "You were always sick, always worried about bills. I wanted freedom." "Freedom?" I said bitterly. "By destroying me?" He sighed. "You'll be fine, Emma. You've got your sister, your health." I had to look out for myself. There was a silence, thick, electric. Then I said quietly, "You forged my name. You sold my home. That's not freedom, Daniel. That's cruelty." He didn't reply. When I heard the line go dead, I realized that was the last piece of him I'd ever recognize, his cowardice. The next morning, Clara called. "Emma, we've located him." My heart raced. "Where?" "Singapore. He used the funds to open a trading account there, but get this, the account's frozen now. Authorities flagged suspicious activity." "So he can't access the money?" "Not legally, no. But we need to act fast. We can file a civil claim to recover your share before he finds another loophole." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. Let's do it. As days turned into weeks, I focused on rebuilding small parts of my life. Cooking breakfast with Sophie, reading before bed, taking long walks to clear my mind. But the nights were still hard. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face, the man I'd once loved, smiling at me while planning my ruin. One evening, I found myself going through our old wedding album. The photos felt like scenes from a movie I no longer belonged in. Daniel, holding my hand, promising forever. Me believing him. I turned the last page, and something fell out. A folded receipt. From a jewelry store. It wasn't mine. The date? 3 months before I got sick. The item? A gold bracelet engraved, "To Lila, Love D." I froze. Lila. That name hit me like a brick. She was his colleague. The woman he'd mentioned casually a few times. I'd met her once, at his office party. She'd smiled too sweetly, stood too close. I remember Daniel brushing it off. She's just a friend, Emma. Now I know the truth. The affair wasn't new. It was part of his plan. He hadn't just betrayed me emotionally or financially. He'd done it all for her. I took the bracelet and receipt straight to Clara the next morning. "This proves motive," she said, her eyes sharp. "He wasn't just running from you. He was building a new life with someone else." I nodded, my throat tight. "Then let's make sure he doesn't enjoy it." For the first time since all this began, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. For me, for my home, for every piece of my life he'd tried to erase. That night, I wrote in my journal, the one I used to keep for gratitude notes. "Dear future me, you survived worse than betrayal. You survived a man who mistook your kindness for weakness. Don't ever forget who you are. Don't ever let anyone silence your truth again." I closed the book gently. Outside, the city lights flickered, faint but steady. Like me, the morning sun spilled through the curtains like quiet determination. For the first time since it all began, I woke up without crying. That letter, those bank statements, that bracelet, they weren't just reminders of what Daniel took from me. They were evidence. And I was ready to use them. I met Clara and Sophie at the courthouse downtown. The building felt colder than I remembered. All marble floors and hushed voices. But walking through those glass doors, I felt power returning to my steps. "Emma," Clara said softly, handing me a folder. "This petition gives you the right to reclaim your half of the sale money and charge Daniel for fraud and forgery. Are you sure you're ready for this?" I took a deep breath. "I've never been more ready." She smiled. Not the sympathetic kind, but the proud kind. The one women give each other when they know the fight is just beginning. We filed the claim that morning. Within hours, a notice was sent to Daniel's last known business address, and to the Singapore authorities. Clara assured me that even if he didn't respond, the law would catch up with him eventually. Still, I couldn't help wondering how it would feel to face him again. Would he look guilty? Or would he still smile that same charming, careless smile that once made me believe love could fix anything? 2 weeks later, I got a message. From him. "You really couldn't just let me go, could you, Emma? You always have to control everything. I'm not coming back. Stop chasing ghosts." For a moment, my hands shook with anger. Then something in me steadied. He wanted to make me angry. He wanted me to be emotional. Because that was the woman he knew. The one who would forgive, forget, and fall apart. But that woman was gone. I took a screenshot of the message and forwarded it to Clara. "Add it to the case file," I wrote. And then I blocked him. A week later, Sophie and I went to a support group for women dealing with financial betrayal. I didn't say much at first. I mostly listened. Stories of women who lost everything to men they trusted. Women who built lives from scratch again. By the end of the session, something shifted in me. I wasn't alone. When it was my turn to speak, I said quietly, "My husband sold our house while I was in the hospital. For a long time, I thought I was the problem. But now I realize I was just the proof of his guilt. And I'm done carrying his shame." The room went silent, and then a few women nodded. Some even clapped softly. And that was the moment I knew I'd begun to heal. Even before justice was served. Weeks passed, and the case moved faster than anyone expected. The authorities in Singapore froze the rest of Daniel's assets. His attempt to open a fake company was exposed, and an international warrant was issued for his arrest for document forgery and fraud. Clara called me one afternoon with the update. Emma, they've detained him. For a second, I didn't believe her. Detained? Yes. He tried to transfer funds again. He's being held while the case proceeds. I didn't say anything. I just sat on the couch, my hands pressed together, feeling still. Not joy. Not revenge. Just peace. A month later, I attended the first hearing in person. Clara represented me, but I insisted on being there. Not because I wanted to see Daniel, but because I wanted to see the end. When they brought him into the courtroom via video link, I barely recognized him. His hair was shorter, his face thinner. He didn't look powerful anymore. He looked small. When he saw me on the screen, he smirked. So this is what you wanted, huh? To see me in handcuffs. I looked straight into the camera and said calmly, "No, Daniel. I wanted you to see what it looks like when a woman refuses to be erased." The courtroom went silent. Even the judge paused for a moment before continuing the proceedings. The ruling took months, but in the end, justice came quietly, without fanfare, without drama. Half the sale money was returned to me. The rest was used to pay his legal penalties and debts. He was sentenced to serve time for fraud and document forgery. When I received the official notice, I didn't feel triumphant. Just closure. I sat by my window that night, sipping tea, the city lights shimmering below. That house, our old house, wasn't mine anymore. But maybe that was okay, because I wasn't that woman anymore either. A few weeks later, Sophie surprised me with an envelope. Inside was a set of keys to a small cottage by the river. "It's not much," she said, "but it's yours. A place to start again." Tears filled my eyes as I hugged her. It wasn't just a house. It was a symbol of freedom, of survival, of a new beginning. That night, as I unpacked boxes in my new living room, I found my old wedding ring at the bottom of a drawer. For a long moment I stared at it, not with pain but gratitude, because that ring taught me something I'd never forget. Love without respect isn't love. It's a cage. And I had finally stepped out of it. I placed the ring in a small box and wrote on it, "A lesson, not a loss." Then I closed the box, placed it on the shelf, and let the night fill the room with quiet peace. The news spread faster than I imagined. One morning, I walked into the small grocery store near my new cottage, and two women whispered softly near the vegetable aisle. "That's her," one said. "The one whose husband tried to scam her out of their house." The other replied, "I heard she took him to court and won. Good for her." I didn't turn or react. I simply smiled faintly, picked up a basket, and moved on. It was strange, being talked about again, after so many months of silence. But this time it wasn't a pity in their tone. It was respect. When I returned home, Sophie was waiting on the porch with a newspaper in her hands. "Front page," she said, shaking her head with a half-smile. "Local woman wins fraud case against husband. Legal victory sparks discussion on spousal property rights." My name wasn't mentioned, but the details were unmistakable. The article talked about a woman who trusted her spouse during illness only to face financial betrayal. And suddenly, I realized something. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It had become a voice for countless others who suffered in silence. That week, I received dozens of emails and letters through a support group online. Women who had faced similar betrayals wrote to me, some with trembling words, others with fierce conviction. "Your courage gave me hope to leave. I thought no one would believe me. Thank you for reminding me that I'm not alone." Each message felt like a hand reaching out in the dark, women helping women find light again. Clara told me, "Emma, do you realize what you've done? You turned your pain into a platform. That's rare." I didn't feel like a hero, but I did feel useful. And maybe that was better. Meanwhile, Daniel's name began surfacing in the papers too, not for praise but for shame. Business partners distanced themselves. His social accounts disappeared. His brother, whom I hadn't heard from in years, even reached out once. "Emma," he said on the phone, voice low and uneasy. "I don't know how to say this, but I'm sorry." None of us knew what he was doing. My mother's been heartbroken. I paused, taking in the sincerity in his tone. "I don't blame your family," I said quietly. "But you all should have seen the signs. Sometimes silence protects the wrong person." There was a long pause. "You're right," he whispered. "I'll never forget that." We hung up, and for the first time, I didn't feel hatred toward Daniel's family. Just sadness, for what could have been, had honesty existed between us all. Months later, I attended a charity event organized by the support group. The hall was filled with women from different walks of life: teachers, mothers, lawyers, caregivers. When they asked me to share my story on stage, I hesitated at first. But then I remembered that empty hospital room. That day I came home to strangers living in my house. So, I walked to the podium and spoke softly. "I used to think betrayal was the worst thing that could happen to me," I began. "But now I know, it's also what woke me up. It showed me who I was when everything was taken from me. And it showed me that truth, no matter how painful, is always the first step to freedom." As I spoke, I could see women nodding, some wiping tears. When I finished, the applause wasn't loud. It was steady, heartfelt, like waves washing against the shore. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled without forcing it. After the event, as I stood outside under the soft orange glow of the sunset, Clara joined me. "You know," she said, "I've handled dozens of these cases. But this one, yours, felt different. Because you didn't just want revenge. You wanted peace." I nodded. "I guess I learned that revenge gives you closure for a moment. But peace, it lasts." She smiled. "And that's why you'll be okay." A few weeks later, the final court document arrived. The property records had been amended. The fraudulent sale marked null and void. The legal ownership of my portion was restored officially, though the physical house was long gone. I stared at the paper, then folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. It wasn't about the house anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity. That night, I sat on the porch with Sophie, watching the stars reflect over the river. "Do you ever miss him?" she asked softly. I thought for a while. Sometimes I miss the man I thought he was. But I don't miss the one he became. She nodded. "You know, you could write about this. Help others." "Maybe I will," I said. "Maybe that's how this chapter ends. Not in bitterness, but in truth." The seasons changed. The cottage walls slowly filled with laughter again. Neighbors stopping by, fresh flowers on the windowsill, the scent of cinnamon tea in the air. My life is smaller now, simpler. But it was mine. And that was enough. When I passed by our old street months later, the new family living there had painted the front door blue. I stood across the road for a moment, just watching. A little boy ran through the yard with a toy airplane, his mother calling after him with a smile. I whispered, "Take care of it." Then I turned and walked away, feeling lighter than I ever had. Justice had been served, yes. But more importantly, I had been restored. Not to who I was before Daniel, but to someone stronger. Someone who finally understood that love without trust is just an illusion. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself like a storm. It arrives quietly, in small, almost invisible moments. For me, it came on a morning when I realized I could make breakfast without thinking of him. The silence didn't hurt anymore. It felt clean. A year had passed since the court case ended. The cottage had become more than just a roof over my head. It was my sanctuary. I'd started a small garden in the backyard. At first, the soil felt stubborn, refusing to yield. But as I worked through the seasons, watering, pruning, waiting, I saw life bloom again. And in a strange way, it mirrored my own heart. Every flower that pushed through that earth reminded me that no betrayal, no pain is final. We all have roots deeper than the damage done to us. Sophie still visited often. She'd bring coffee, muffins, and stories about her teenage son learning to drive. We'd sit on the porch, the two of us laughing like girls again. "You're glowing these days," she teased once. "Am I?" I smiled. "Yeah, like someone who finally knows her worth." That made me pause. Because for years, I'd measured my worth by how much I gave, how much I loved, how much I endured. But now I realized, worth isn't proven by what we tolerate. It's revealed by what we refuse to accept anymore. One evening, Clara called me out of the blue. "Emma, guess what?" she said, excitement in her voice. "A legal awareness group wants to feature your story. They're calling it Women Who Fought Back. Would you be willing to share your journey on video?" I hesitated for a moment. Then I looked out at the fading sunlight painting my garden gold. "Yes," I said softly. "If it helps someone else believe they can stand up too, then yes." The next month, I recorded that video, sitting in my own living room, wearing the same blue sweater I had on the day I came home from the hospital. Only this time my voice didn't shake. It carried strength, quiet, but unbreakable. When the video went online, I received messages from people around the world. Some from women betrayed by partners, others from men who'd lost everything but were trying to rebuild. One message simply read, "You made me believe in starting over." And that was all the closure I ever needed. That winter, I took a short trip to the sea, something I'd always dreamed of but never had time for. The waves were fierce and beautiful, crashing endlessly against the rocks. As I stood there, the wind tangling my hair, I whispered to myself, "Thank you for surviving." It wasn't a prayer or a goodbye. It was gratitude for every broken piece that had shaped me into who I had become. Now when I tell my story, I don't speak bitterly. I speak from peace. Because pain taught me boundaries, loss taught me value, and betrayal taught me to trust myself first. I learned that love isn't about who stays. It's about who shows up when everything falls apart, even if that person is just you. If you were sitting across from me right now, I'd tell you this. Don't be afraid of endings. They're often just beginning wearing a disguise. And sometimes, the life you deserve is waiting for you just beyond the one that broke you. Gentle pause. My name is Emma, and this was my story. The story of how I lost my home, my trust, and my husband, but found myself again. Which city are you listening from? Tell me in the comments. I hope that after every story, your heart feels a little lighter. If my story touched your heart, don't forget to like and share. This was another story from Voices of Auntie May.